والنجم إذا هوى ما ضل صاحبكم وما غوى.
Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is now, actually I'll read Tha'alabi's commentary before I go on this ayah. When the thing that covers covered, we're talking about that ayah, yeah? He says, ذكر المفسرون في وصفها أقوالا. To describe this thing that covered, Mufassirun said lots of things. They tried to come up with what could it be that covered. وَهِيَ تَكَلُّفٌ فِي الْآيَةِ. And all of that is just overkill. They're trying too hard. Takalluf means they're trying too hard. It's not authentic. لأن الله تعالى أبهم ذلك. Because Allah Himself made it a mystery. Allah, if He wanted to tell us what covered, He would have told us Himself. وَهُمْ يُرِيدُونَ شَرْحَهُ. But they want an explanation. He says, وَقَدْ قَالَ صلى الله عليه وسلم. But the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم already said, فَغَشِيَهَا أَلْوَانٌ لَا أَدْرِي مَا هِيَ. The Prophet ﷺ, one description, we don't know the authenticity of this report entirely, but if we take this report, he says, it was covered by colors, I don't know what they are. It was covered by colors, I don't know what they are. Now, it's interesting that the word colors was used because colors are a refraction of light, right? So the spectrum of color we have is refracted from light. But nur in the unseen world is much more advanced than the nur of this world. So when that refracts, the colors that it produces, we don't even know what they are. It's beyond our description. And that's the closest we get to a description of what was covering the lote tree when it covered. But one thing is for sure, if he's mentioning colors, then it has to do with light. That's for sure. So whatever took over was some kind of brilliant light, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't have colors. Okay. Now we get to the incredible statement from Allah about the Prophet ﷺ's experience. He's looking at this takeover of this new kind of light. And he says, مَا زَاغَ الْبَصَرِ. The eye did not turn away or deviate. Let me tell you a little bit about deviate. تزايغ التمايل في الأسنان والرماح. When teeth are crooked, like British people, or spears are bent, that's called tazayugh. Al-inhiraf bishidda, when something is bent and it doesn't want to come back, like the teeth being crooked. You need kind of braces or something to set them straight. They don't want to come back on their own. From this, وَمِنَ الْإِنْحِرَافِ وَمَنْ يَزِغْ مِنْهُمْ عَنْ أَمْرِنَا فَلَمَّا زَاغُوا وَزَاغَ اللَّهُ قُلُوبَهُم. Or these expressions in the Quran mean when someone deviated from the right path. When they deviated from the right path. So what does it mean, مَا زَاغَ الْبَصَرِ? Another expression in Surah Al-Ahzab is إِذْ زَاغَتِ الْأَبْصَارِ, when the eyes deviated. Meaning, the enemy was coming, in Surah Al-Ahzab, the enemy was coming and the Muslims were terrified because there were civilians inside a city and there was an overwhelming force coming to invade the city. So some people were even having a hard time making eye contact with the enemy. They would look away, not look directly at the enemy because it was too terrifying. Some of you have zayghul basar when you're watching a horror movie, astaghfirullah. I can't watch. That's zaghat al-absar. Now, if you try to stare at the sun, your eyes are going to squint and you're going to want to what? Look away. The light of this tree is much more intense than the light of the sun, isn't it? So the Prophet ﷺ, when he's about to look, what should naturally happen to his sight? He should want to turn away. But he says his eye didn't deviate. His eye didn't turn away. Now, you maybe have done this as a kid because you're stupid and I was stupid. We don't do this as adults. Sometimes your friend says, let's stare at the sun for 10 seconds. You're like, okay, let's do it. And you do it for 10 seconds, and what happens after 10 seconds? Now you see these yellow, purple flashes everywhere. Like, what's on your face? That's nur, bro. That's nur. Your vision becomes corrupted because you stared at the sun too long. One of the meanings of wama tagha is he stared at what he stared at, the light, the new overarching, phenomenon. He stared at it and his eye didn't turn away. And by turning away, his eyesight didn't go bad. He didn't start seeing things that aren't there. وَمَا طَغَى. That's one of its meanings. So he was able to withstand seeing this vision. This is actually the meaning of tagha, lots and lots and lots of meanings, but I don't think I'm going to go into that today. But I will tell you that it means exceeding the limit, going too far. You know what that means? You look at something, but if you look for too long, it'll do damage to you, right? So he says he saw it and it still didn't do damage to him. It still didn't damage him. مَا زَاغَ الْبَصَرُ وَمَا طَغَى. But then there are scholars who had reflections on this experience of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. مَا تَجَاوَزَ الْحَدِّ إِلَى مَا لَمْ يُؤْذَنْ لَهُ. مَا طَغَى here means he looked at what he was supposed to look at, but he was, مَعَ أَنَّ ذَلِكَ الْعَالَمْ غَرِيبٌ عَنْ بَنِي آدَمَ. This is amazing commentary by Al-Biqa'i rahimahullah. He says, the Prophet is in a new universe. No human being has ever seen this place. When you're in a new place you've never seen, where does your eye go? Everywhere. Everywhere. But when the thing covered the tree, the Prophet looked at it and didn't look anywhere else and didn't okay, I've seen enough of that. I'm going to look here. What else is here? What else is here? No, the eye didn't violate, the eye didn't exceed this view. It's as if this was so captivating that it didn't allow for him to look even anywhere else. Something took over the tree that was so empowering that even though he's in this incredibly new, shocking world, he doesn't want to look at anything else. He can't. Not only is his eye able to tolerate it, withstand it, that's ma zagha al-basar, his eye doesn't want to go anywhere else. وَمَا طَغَى. He's just he's just staring and staring and staring. Another meaning that's been taken from this. Actually, I'll tell you that Razi thing a little later. It's really beautiful too. When you're staring at something, it could look respectful or disrespectful. You know that, right? Sometimes when I'm at an airport, I'm dressed in civilian clothing, and people think they know me, but they're not sure yet. So you know what they do? They look at me like this. And I honestly think they're mad because I exist. I've offended this person somehow, or he thinks that I'm somehow like the spawn of the devil. I don't know what. But he's staring at me like, the bad guy stares at you in a movie, astaghfirullah. And then they keep getting closer, and I keep getting more nervous because the look is still. And then they get closer and they say, "Are you Nouman Ali Khan?" Their face changes after that. And then I'm like, yeah. Half of me wants to say, no, that's my cousin. That's not me. You got the wrong guy. But the look can actually be kind of disrespectful too. Kind of offensive too. Sometimes you're staring at your mom. Some kids have this weird staring problem. And kids that are weird, they stare and they have their mouth open. You're staring and your mom says, "Guy, what are you looking at?" Because you're staring in a way that is not respectful. Then you're staring at something with awe. The way we stare at the Kaaba is not like this. We don't do that. We don't do this. There's a love in our eyes. There's a humility in our eyes. The eyes affect the entire face. You know that, right? The eyes affect the entire face. He says the eye didn't turn away, but he looked in a way that isn't rebellious. وَمَا طَغَى. He looked with humility and love and awe. So the وَمَا طَغَى adds yet another dimension. Because just because you're constantly staring at something, it can actually be offensive too. But he took that meaning off the table when he said وَمَا طَغَى. You see that? Similarly, another place in the Quran, the Quraysh, the Kuffar, stare at the Prophet ﷺ. But the way they stare at him لَيُزْلِقُونَكَ بِأَبْصَارِهِمْ لَمَّا سَمِعُوا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنْ كَادَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَيُزْلِقُونَكَ بِأَبْصَارِهِمْ. They stare at you like they want you to fall off, like they're shooting laser beams at you. Like that. You know? Like some of you, we don't have really much public transportation in Dallas, but I'll give you a New York reference. When you're on a subway in New York or on a bus in New York, some people just like awkward. You just gotta change trains, go the other way, get off the next stop, even if it's not your home, because this guy's like, you know, this is ما زاغ البصر وما طغى. Now let's get to Imam Razi's beautiful insight. The eye didn't deviate and it didn't cross limits. That's the basic meaning. Deviate and cross limits. Zagha is deviate, tagha is cross limits. But in Arabic, for deviate, you can say mala. Ma mala al-basar. The eye didn't deviate. And crossing limits could be tajawaza. So the wording could have been ma mala al-basaru wa ma tajawaza. What's the point of saying zagha as opposed to mala and saying tagha as opposed to tajawaza? Because both zagha and tagha have spiritual meanings too. Mala and tajawaza don't. Zagha, like azagha Allahu qulubahum. Rabbana la tuzigh qulubana ba'da idh hadaytana. His eye didn't deviate, but the spiritual meaning is his heart never deviated. Wa ma tagha, his eye didn't go anywhere else. His eye remained humble, but his heart would never rebel either. The spiritual meaning is captured alongside the physical meaning. This is the world where the spiritual and the physical meet together. So the wording used combines the spiritual and the physical. It's incredible. Perfection of words. ما زاغ البصر وما طغى. Now, final ayah of this passage. Now I get to the, oh, by the way, one other meaning of sidra, Imam Razi, before I get to the last part. Sidra actually also means the climax of something. And then by adding al-muntaha to it, it's the ultimate climax of climaxes. Sidrat al-muntaha. He says, أن يكون ذلك بيانا لوصول محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم إلى سدرة اليقين يعني إلى منتهى اليقين إلى سدرة اليقين الذي لا يقين فوقه. It's as if Allah is describing when his eyes didn't deviate and he didn't rebel, that he reached a level of conviction. There is no conviction above that. Physically, the Prophet was higher than any other creation. And spiritually, the Prophet has an iman more than any other creation. Subhanallah. And this is inside ma zagha al-basar wa ma tagha.